I'll never forget the sound. The deadbolt sliding into place, the laughter muffled on the other side of the door, and me standing out on the porch, breath fogging in the icy air. Christmas lights twinkled above me like they were mocking me. My own grandchildren had locked me out. Their shadows danced across the curtains as the warmth inside pressed against the frozen glass, but none of it was meant for me. I remember pounding once, twice. No answer. Only the clink of wine glasses and the thud of music. They left me outside like trash left on the curb after a holiday feast. My fingers stiffened around the handle of my old coat, the same coat I wore when my husband and I first scraped together enough to buy this house. Now it belonged to them in spirit, if not on paper. At least that's what they believed. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped off the porch. It was too cold to cry, too raw even for tears. Somewhere down the street, another family was singing carols. The glow of fireplaces flickered from windows all around me. For a moment, I wondered if anyone else could see me standing there, cast out of my own bloodline. I swore then and there, under the heavy winter sky, that next year would be different. I would not be the forgotten grandmother, the burden shoved aside. I would come back, but not as a victim. That night, I slept on a cot in the church basement, wrapped in a scratchy blanket that smelled faintly of mildew. The pastor's wife offered me soup. I thanked her, but my mind wasn't on the food. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every smirk, every whispered joke, every cruel glance from that evening. And beneath all of it, a strange calm grew like frost on glass. Revenge doesn't come quickly. It needs patience, precision. By spring, I was already collecting my first pieces. It began small. A stack of unpaid bills I found stuffed into the mailbox when one of my grandsons forgot to change his forwarding address. Final notice, stamped in red across envelopes he probably hoped no one would see. I saw them. I tucked them away. In June, I visited an old friend who still worked at the courthouse. Records are public, yes, but sometimes the public forgets what's sitting in plain sight. Deeds, liens, judgments, every scrap of their carelessness written in ink. I made copies. I kept them organized in folders labeled neatly, like recipes, only these were recipes for ruin. By late summer, the game had shifted. I was no longer a discarded grandmother. I was a woman with a ledger. Every cruel word, every betrayal, every lie, they all had weight now, documented and undeniable. Sometimes at night, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, steam rising into the dim light, and smile at the thought of their faces when the truth finally landed. They thought I was invisible. They thought I'd fade quietly, but I was watching, recording, preparing. Autumn leaves fell, brittle underfoot. My neighbors decorated for Halloween. I decorated too, but with something different. I rewrote my will. I didn't finalize it yet. Oh no, not yet. That would come later. But I drafted it. Line by line, a mirror held up to their selfishness. Then December arrived, sharp and merciless. The smell of pine filled the air. Storefronts glowed with garlands. And in my little kitchen, I baked cookies just as I used to when they were small. Only this time, I wasn't baking for joy. I was preparing for an audience. Christmas Eve, I sent the invitations myself, handwritten, polite. The kind of notes no one could refuse without looking ungrateful. I made sure the ink was steady, my script neat. They would come. They always came when there was food, gifts, warmth. And so, as the snow began to fall heavy and white, I set the stage. The tree glittered with ornaments that had hung for 50 years. The fireplace crackled, logs hissing with sap. The table was heavy with roasted ham, bowls of potatoes, pies lined like soldiers. Everything looked perfect, a postcard holiday. But the perfection was only the wrapping paper. The real gifts lay hidden. Each package carefully placed beneath the tree contained not toys, not trinkets, but truth. A truth that would cut sharper than any knife in the kitchen. I adjusted the stockings on the mantel, stepped back, and looked around. My house had never looked warmer, more inviting. The irony almost made me laugh. The clock struck 6. Headlights flashed across the snow outside. Tires crunched on the driveway. They were here. And this time, I was waiting. The first knock rattled the door, loud and entitled. I smoothed my sweater, took one last glance at the tree lights, then opened it wide. There they were. My grandchildren, wrapped in scarves, cheeks red from the cold, eyes darting past me as if I were a doorman, not their grandmother. Behind them, their spouses carried bags. Shiny packages peeked out, price tags still dangling, all for show, always for show. "Well," one of them muttered, "at least it's warm in here." The comment stung, but I only smiled. Let them think I was meek. Let them believe I'd forgotten last year, that night on the porch when they shut the door in my face. Their laughter muffled while frost crept into my bones. They thought the cold had killed my spirit. They didn't know it had preserved it. "Come in," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Dinner's ready." The smell of roasted ham greeted them. The flicker of candles danced across polished silverware. For a moment, I saw hesitation in their faces, as if they weren't sure they belonged in such warmth. But hunger is stronger than guilt. They filed in, stomping snow off their boots, talking loudly, too loudly, filling the silence I had kept all year. At the table, I watched them. The clink of forks, the scrape of chairs, the way one granddaughter reached for the rolls before anyone else. Another poured wine like it was her birthright. They didn't look at me when they said, "Thank you." Not once. I let the chatter flow. Let them eat. Let them laugh. Every sound scraped against me. But I endured, because beneath their plates, beneath their gifts, beneath every bite of food, the trap was already set. Halfway through the meal, I noticed the first crack. One grandson leaned in, whispering to his sister. Too low for most ears, but I caught it. "Did you ever pay off that loan?" Her smile faltered for half a second before she forced a laugh. "Mind your business." There it was. The unease. The secret pressing against her ribs like a splinter. I sipped my tea, steam curling in front of my face, and filed it away. They had no idea I already knew the balance, the overdue notices, the collectors' names, all in my folders, all wrapped neatly under the tree. Later, as dessert was served, pumpkin pie, whipped cream trembling on top, I heard another small thing, a mutter from across the table. "Don't mention the car." She doesn't know. He meant me, but I did know. The repossession papers were folded inside the largest gift box under the tree. Funny how they assumed ignorance simply because I smiled. I let the silence linger just a beat too long before saying, "You've all grown up so fast. Sometimes I hardly recognize you anymore." One granddaughter rolled her eyes, subtle but not enough to escape me. "Well, people change, Grandma." Change. That was her word. I remembered her laughing last year, wine glass in hand, while I stood outside in the snow. Yes, they had changed. And so had I. The fire popped in the hearth. Outside, wind howled against the windows. For a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. I watched their shadows flicker across the walls, long and distorted, like predators circling prey. Only they didn't realize. They weren't the hunters anymore. Then I leaned forward just enough to make them uneasy. "Before we open gifts," I said softly, "I have something special planned." They looked at each other, confused. One of the grandsons snorted. "What, like a game?" "Yes," I said, my voice cutting through the warm air like a blade hidden in velvet. "A game. One where we all tell the truth." The laughter faltered. Forks paused midair. "What do you mean?" another asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. I let a slow smile spread across my face. "You'll see." Their eyes darted to one another. Jokes dried up. The warmth of the fire suddenly felt too hot. One granddaughter tugged at her necklace. Another adjusted her napkin too many times. They didn't know what I had prepared. Not yet, but their instincts told them enough. Something was off. The storm outside pressed harder against the windows. Snow piled against the porch, sealing the house tighter. There would be no easy escape. And as I reached beneath the tree for the first package, its paper crisp, its bow tied perfectly, I felt the weight of the year settle into my bones. This was the moment I had waited for. The first package was small, a neat square wrapped in gold paper, tied with red ribbon. I placed it in front of my eldest grandson, Matthew. He smirked, glancing at the others. "What's this?" "Thought you said you were on a fixed income, Grandma." The laughter was forced, brittle. I didn't respond, just waited. He tugged the ribbon loose, peeled the paper back. At first, all he saw was a plain white envelope. He frowned, slipped a finger under the flap, and pulled out the contents. The room shifted, air heavy. Overdue credit card statements, 6 of them. Balances circled in red, the kind of numbers that don't vanish with excuses. For a moment, he tried to laugh. "What's this supposed to be, some kind of joke?" I sipped my tea, steam fogging my glasses. "Not a joke, Matthew." A reminder. The others leaned closer, whispers rising like gnats. His wife turned pale. "Matt, where did these come from?" He shoved the papers back into the envelope, jaw tight. "None of your business." But it was too late. The seed had been planted. His secret wasn't a secret anymore. The way his sister's lips curved ever so slightly told me everything. She was already storing this away to use against him. I leaned back in my chair, the fire casting shadows across the room. Every gift tonight will be special, personal, chosen with care. Forks clinked nervously against plates. No one laughed now. The second package I chose was larger, wrapped in silver. I slid it toward Claire, my oldest granddaughter. Her manicured nails trembled as she reached for it. Inside, a stack of glossy photographs, not from a family album, number. These were printed from the courthouse archives, evidence of the forged signature she had used on a loan document, pretending her mother had co-signed. The room went silent. Only the crackle of the fireplace filled the gap. Claire flipped through the photos, her face draining of color. How did you? Her husband grabbed the papers, scanned them, then turned on her with a sharp whisper. "You told me that loan was clean." She pushed the box away like it burned her hands. "This is ridiculous. She's making things up." But the photos lay on the table in plain sight. Truth doesn't need an audience to exist. It just needs light. I folded my hands. "No one made anything up, dear. You did that yourself." Gasps. Tension wound tighter. One granddaughter reached for her glass of wine, drained it in one swallow. Another whispered, "What is happening right now?" I almost laughed. What was happening was justice wrapped in ribbons. The storm outside slammed against the windows, rattling the panes. Shadows stretched long across the table, bending faces into strange shapes. They looked less like family and more like predators circling each other, exactly as they were. Matthew muttered something under his breath. Claire snapped back. Voices rose. Their unity cracked like thin ice. I cleared my throat sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Sit down." "We're not finished." The authority in my voice startled even me. They froze, eyes flicking toward me like I was someone new. And maybe I was. I reached for another gift, smaller, again, red paper, a tidy bow. "Whose turn now?" One of them whispered, unease thick in the air. I placed it in front of Emily, the youngest. She stared at it as though it might bite. Her hands trembled as she untied the ribbon. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it slowly. Her lips parted, then pressed tight. It was a screenshot. Her social media posts, cruel words she'd written about her own grandmother, about me, calling me a burden, a relic, an anchor dragging everyone else down. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Her siblings read over her shoulder. One of them muttered, "Wow," Emily's eyes darted toward me, wide, pleading. "Grandma, I didn't—" But lies had no place here anymore. I leaned forward, voice steady. "Every word you wrote, I saved. And now, so will they." Her cheeks flushed red. She shoved the paper away as if she could push the shame off the table, but it lingered, heavy, undeniable. The storm outside roared louder, as though the night itself wanted in on this spectacle. The fire snapped, throwing sparks into the air. The smell of pine needles and candle wax clung thick around us. They weren't smiling anymore. They weren't even pretending. The masks were slipping one by one, and beneath them I saw exactly what I had known all along: greed, envy, cruelty. I reached for the next package, my fingers steady, and that was when Matthew slammed his hand down on the table, rattling every glass. "That's enough," he hissed, but he was wrong. It was only the beginning. Matthew's fist still rested on the table, knuckles white. The candles flickered from the vibration, wax dripping in uneven rivulets down their sides. "Enough," he said again, his voice louder this time. I stared at him, calm, steady. "You think you're the one who decides when enough has been said?" "Not tonight." His wife placed a hand on his arm, trying to anchor him, but his eyes were on me. Cold, seething, a cornered animal. The others shifted in their seats, unease growing heavier than the blizzard outside. The storm howled against the windows, snow piling higher, pressing them in. No escape. I slid the next box across the table, ignoring Matthew's glare. Blue wrapping, silver ribbon. "Open it," I said, directing it toward Claire's husband. He hesitated, but the silence stretched too long. Finally, he tore into the paper. What spilled out wasn't jewelry or trinkets. It was copies of emails, dozens of them, from his workplace. Proof of falsified invoices he thought no one would ever see. Claire's gasp broke the silence. "You told me those numbers were clean." He shot her a look sharp enough to wound. How did she— "I keep records," I interrupted, "all year long." The fire cracked loudly, sending sparks into the grate. The smell of scorched pine filled the air, mingling with tension so thick it was almost visible. Across the table, Emily clutched her wine glass like a shield. Her hand trembled, drops spilling onto the white tablecloth, staining it crimson. She whispered, "Why are you doing this?" I looked at her, my voice flat. "Because last Christmas you left me outside in the snow." "I swore you'd remember it this year." Her face crumpled, but I turned away. Weak apologies meant nothing. Instead, I reached for the next gift. Wrapped in striped paper, tied with gold twine. I placed it in front of another grandson, Daniel. He opened it slowly, suspicion written across his brow. Inside, a folder, rental agreements, 2 signatures forged, his landlord's and his girlfriend's. Fake sublets, illegal. Daniel's face drained of color. "This isn't—" "It is," I cut in. "Every signature, every date. You've been playing landlord with property that isn't yours, making money off lies. You thought I wouldn't notice. I did." He shoved the folder shut, but not before his siblings saw enough. Claire muttered something under her breath. Matthew smirked bitterly. The table was splintering. Sideways glances, whispered accusations. They weren't focused on me anymore. They were circling each other, sniffing out weaknesses, filing every exposed wound into memory, exactly as I wanted. The storm pressed harder, wind whistling through the chimney. The fire snapped, shadows twisted across the walls, elongating every sneer, every scowl. They looked less like grandchildren and more like strangers at war. I leaned back, folding my hands. "Do you see yourselves yet? Do you see what you've become?" No one answered. Just the sound of their shallow breathing and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then Claire's voice cut through, sharp. "Where did you even get all this? You spying on us?" I smiled faintly. I don't need to spy. You leave trails everywhere, receipts, posts, whispers. You thought I wasn't listening. You thought I wasn't watching. Matthew sneered. So what? You ruined Christmas because your feelings got hurt last year. The words hung heavy. His siblings shifted uncomfortably. Even they knew the weight of his arrogance. I set down my teacup, porcelain clinking against the saucer. You call it ruining Christmas. I call it truth. And tonight, truth sits at this table. The room was thick with heat from the fire, but their faces were pale. One granddaughter wiped sweat from her brow. Another tugged at her necklace chain until it nearly snapped. I reached slowly for another box, bright red, big enough to carry something weighty. I slid it toward Emily. Her lips parted. No, she whispered. Not me again. Yes, I said. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside was a stack of printed screenshots, bank transfers from her account to an online gambling site. Thousands of dollars, all gone. Her siblings leaned closer, eyes wide. Matthew let out a low whistle. Well, well. Emily shoved the box away, tears pooling. You don't understand. I kept my voice cold. You're right. I don't understand how someone who claimed to be broke managed to gamble away more than I ever spent on groceries in a year. The silence cracked then. Matthew's laughter, sharp and cruel. Claire's glare. Daniel's muttered curse. They were tearing at each other now, one insult after another, each gift a weapon. The storm outside howled, rattling the shutters. The fire blazed, shadows leaping across their faces, making them look monstrous, and I sat at the head of the table, calm, silent, steady, watching as the predators began to devour one another. Then I lifted the final box from beneath the tree, heavy, wrapped in white with a black bow. Every head turned toward me, and I said, "This one isn't for you to open. It's for me." The white box with the black bow sat heavy in my lap. My hands rested on it steady, while their eyes clung to me like moths circling a flame. "You said it's for you," Claire whispered, her voice brittle. "What does that even mean?" I didn't answer right away. I traced the ribbon with one finger, letting the silence stretch. Outside, wind howled against the eaves. The snow pressed higher against the porch, sealing the house like a tomb. Finally, I tugged the bow free. The ribbon slithered to the floor. I lifted the lid. Inside, neat folders, labeled in my handwriting, one for each of them. And on top, a single envelope marked with one word, Will. The room froze. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Breathing shallow, uneven. I slid the envelope out slowly, laid it flat on the tablecloth, where candlelight spilled across the bold black letters. Matthew leaned forward, voice sharp. "What are you doing with that?" I looked him in the eye. "Showing you what family really means." Gasps, whispers, the scrape of a chair leg against hardwood. Their hunger shifted, not for food now, but for something far more poisonous, inheritance. The fire hissed, throwing sparks into the air. Its glow washed across their faces, sharpening their greed. I tapped the envelope once. "This house, the land, everything I've built, you've all been so eager to count it as yours." Claire's lips parted, quick. "We never—" "Yes," I cut her off, "you have." Every whisper, every joke about when I'd finally be gone. "Don't deny it." Her mouth snapped shut. I let my gaze sweep the table. "You forgot something important. My pen is stronger than your entitlement, and this—" I tapped the envelope again. "Decides everything." Matthew's jaw tightened. His wife reached for his arm, but he pulled it away. "You wouldn't cut us out," he said, though his tone wavered. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" The question hung like smoke. Then I reached back into the box, pulled out another folder, this one labeled Daniel. I slid it across the table. He hesitated, then opened it. His face drained. Inside, not just the fraudulent rental agreements, but copies of a police report, his name listed in an investigation about falsified leases. His hands shook. How did you get this? I told you. I watch. I listen. The others pounced. You told us you were investing, Claire hissed. You lied. Daniel shoved the folder shut, face pale. Shut up. But it was too late. They were circling him, ready to feed. The room erupted. Accusations, curses, denials. Forks clattered against plates. Voices overlapped, sharp and jagged. I sat back, calm, sipping my tea. The steam rose, fogging my glasses. Through the blur, I saw them clearly. Not grandchildren, not family, but predators tearing one another apart. And yet, even predators know when something bigger is in the room. Their voices dropped when I reached again into the box. This time, I held up a folder labeled Matthew. His smirk vanished. I slid it across the table. Open it. He didn't move. His wife snatched it, tore it open. Her face crumpled as she scanned the pages. Matt, these are court documents. The room hushed. His secret spilled in silence. Fraud charges pending. A business venture gone rotten. His signature in black ink on contracts he thought buried. Claire whispered, You dragged us into debt for that. Matthew slammed the folder shut, stood abruptly, chair legs screeching against the floor, his face flushed red. This is insane. I didn't raise my voice. What's insane is leaving your grandmother to freeze while you toasted champagne. What's insane is thinking I'd die quietly, leaving you everything. No more. The storm wailed outside, rattling the shutters like angry fists. The fire popped, sparks jumping high. The air smelled of pine sap and something darker, panic. Emily whispered, Grandma, what are you going to do with the will? I leaned forward, hands folded on the table. I've already done it. They stiffened, eyes wide. You mean? Claire stammered. Yes. My voice was steel. I rewrote everything. You are no longer heirs, not one of you. Gasps, shouts. Matthew's fist hit the table again. You can't do that. I met his fury with calm. I already did. The envelope sat between us like a blade, and then, bang. A sudden noise at the back door. Every head turned. The bang at the back door echoed through the house, sharp as a gunshot. For a moment, no one breathed. Candle flames wavered, their shadows jittering against the walls. Matthew's wife whispered, Who could that be? In this storm, the wind howled in response, rattling the shutters. Snow pressed higher against the porch, sealing us tighter. There was no reason for anyone to be outside tonight, unless fate wanted a front row seat. I stood slowly, every eye following me. The wooden floor creaked under my steps as I crossed the room. My hand rested on the cold brass knob. I hesitated, long enough for their fear to bloom. Then I pulled it open. Nothing but wind and snow. The storm pushed inside, biting cold that made the candles shiver. A single branch had snapped from the oak tree and slammed into the door. That was all. I closed it again, locked it. Not everything that knocks deserves to be let in. When I turned back, they were pale, eyes wide, as if they hoped it had been a reprieve, a distraction, no such mercy. I returned to my chair, lifted the next folder from the white box. Claire. Her hands twitched. Grandma, please. But I slid it across the table. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were photos, notarized records, her affair with a business partner, hotel receipts, messages, the proof she thought deleted. Her husband snatched the papers, his face hardening as he read. His jaw clenched. You said those nights you were at the gym. Claire tried to grab them back. It's not. The words dissolved under his stare. The room grew thick with their silence. Matthew laughed bitterly. Well, at least I'm not the only liar here. Her eyes flared. Look who's talking, fraud boy. The fire spat sparks onto the hearth, a hiss like warning. The smell of scorched wood filled the room. Shadows jumped across their faces, ugly, twisted. I watched the venom spread. They were already tearing one another apart, predators in holiday clothing. Then I placed another folder on the table. Emily. She didn't touch it, just shook her head, muttering, "No more." But her brother reached over, flipped it open. His smirk faded. "God, student loans in your mother's name, without telling her." Emily's face collapsed. I was desperate. Matthew barked, "We're all desperate, but at least we don't drag our parents into it." His wife shot him a look. "Don't you dare pretend you're noble. You've got charges pending." The table roared to life, voices colliding, accusations ricocheting, forks clattered, a glass toppled, red wine spilling across the white cloth like blood. I stayed still, hands folded, calm as a judge. Their chaos was the verdict. The storm outside rattled the windows harder, as if trying to join in. The room smelled of wax, ham gone cold, pine needles dropping onto the rug. I reached for the final folder, heavy, labeled collective. They went silent, the air thickened. "This one," I said, voice low, "isn't for one of you. It's for all of you." I opened it myself, spread the papers across the table. Tax evasion linked to a family trust they had tried to manipulate. Signed statements showing how they had siphoned off small amounts from an account they thought no one would notice. Together, a conspiracy, big and ugly. Their faces drained. "That's not," Daniel stammered. "It is," I snapped. "Every theft, every lie. Do you understand now? You didn't just betray me. You betrayed each other." The fire popped again. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, silence. Then Matthew slammed both fists onto the table, rattling every glass. "So what now, Grandma? You humiliate us, cut us out, and laugh while we freeze. Is that the big plan?" I leaned in, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You froze me last year. Do you remember the porch, the locked door, the laughter while I stood in the snow? Tonight is balance." Emily sobbed quietly. Claire's husband shoved his chair back, face tight with rage. Daniel muttered curses under his breath. I sat straighter, let my words drop like stones. "You thought you were wolves, but wolves know loyalty. You're vultures, picking scraps off bones, and you'll fight each other for the last shred of meat." Their silence cracked into shouting, brother against sister, husband against wife, claws out, voices sharp. The table became a battlefield, and then the lights flickered, once, twice. Darkness swallowed the room, only the fire glowed, shadows writhing across their faces, and in that half-light I spoke. "Now you'll see what it feels like to be left in the cold." Darkness pressed against the windows, thicker than the storm itself. The only light came from the fire, its glow shifting across the room, bending their faces into grotesque masks. The storm moaned outside, rattling the glass panes. Snow slammed against the roof like fists demanding entry. Matthew cursed under his breath. "Great. Perfect. Power's out. What now?" His sister snapped, "Maybe if you hadn't slammed the table like a lunatic." "Don't start with me, Claire." Their words crackled like the fire, sharp, dangerous. I sat at the head of the table, my silhouette steady in the flicker. The blackout doesn't change a thing. The truth is still on the table. Emily whimpered. The wine glass slipped from her hand and rolled to the floor, spilling dark liquid that spread across the boards like blood. Her shadow shook, frail against the firelight. I leaned forward, voice low but cutting through their bickering. "Do you hear it? The storm, the wind clawing at the shutters. That's what I heard last year, standing outside your door while you laughed and toasted. You thought I'd forget. I didn't. I counted every second of it." The fire popped, a spark jumping onto the rug before fizzling out. The smell of smoke clung thick in the air. Daniel rose suddenly, pacing, his shadow stretched long, jerking across the wall. "This is insane. You're playing with us, Grandma. You've lost it." I watched him carefully. "If that's what you need to believe, then go on. But know this. Insanity doesn't prepare files, doesn't pull records, doesn't rewrite wills. Insanity freezes on a porch. I survived. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Each of them sat there, locked in the glow, shifting in their chairs, the weight of secrets suffocating. Then Claire's husband broke it. His voice was low, bitter. "You've destroyed us. You think you're teaching a lesson, but all you've done is salt the wounds." I fixed him with a stare. "I didn't destroy you. You did. I only unwrapped the truth." The storm wailed louder, shaking the walls. For a moment, I thought the whole house might splinter. Snow pressed higher against the doors, hemming us in. The wind found cracks in the wood and sang through them, a high-pitched whistle like a scream. Emily clutched her head, rocking slightly. "Make it stop, please." I almost pitied her. Almost. I reached for the envelope marked Will again, placed it back on the table. "You want to know what I did with it? You want to see the truth written in black and white?" Matthew's eyes lit with greed, even through his fury. "Show us." "Prove you're serious." I shook my head. "Not yet. Not while you still cling to hope. Hope makes you blind. Tonight, you'll see yourselves clearly before I show you anything else." The fire crackled, casting long, shifting shadows. Their faces looked monstrous, greedy, desperate, broken. Daniel suddenly slammed his hand down. "I'm not sitting here like a prisoner." He stormed toward the door, yanked at the handle. It didn't budge. Snow had sealed it shut. He pulled harder, but the door only groaned. The storm roared back, mocking him. I spoke softly, almost to myself. "Told you. Not everything that knocks deserves to be let in, and not everything outside will let you out." He turned, eyes wild. "You planned this." I didn't answer. Silence was sharper. He stalked back to the table, muttering curses. Matthew leaned forward, sneering. "So what's the end game, Grandma? You humiliate us, lock us in here, make us claw at each other. What does that give you?" The firelight glinted in my glasses as I met his stare. "It gives me what you stole. Control." The words sank deep. Claire's face twisted. Emily sobbed. Daniel paced like a trapped wolf. Then slowly I lifted another item from the white box. Not a folder this time. A small silver tape recorder. Old-fashioned. Heavy. I set it on the table. "What's that?" Claire asked, her voice thin. I pressed play. Their own voices filled the room. A recording I'd made the year before, the night they locked me out. Their laughter. Their words. "Just leave her out there. She'll tire herself out. She's old, she'll be fine. Burden. That's all she is." The sound of clinking glasses. Laughter. The firelight flickered across their faces as they heard themselves, undeniable, in their own tones. Emily covered her ears. "Stop it, please." I let the recording play until the end, when one of them, Matthew, unmistakably, said, "She won't last another year anyway." I clicked it off. Silence, only the fire and the storm. My voice was steady. I lasted. "Longer than your decency." The room felt smaller, the air tighter. They weren't family now. They were enemies bound to one another by exposure. Matthew spoke, low and dark. "So what now? You cut us out and laugh while we starve." I folded my hands. "Not starve. Just learn. You wanted my house, my money, my name. But tonight, you'll walk away with nothing, except the truth. And the truth will haunt you longer than hunger." The wind slammed against the shutters, harder, rattling them like bones. The fire sputtered low, embers glowing like eyes. Their silence was different now, less defiance, more dread. Then suddenly, a sound. A car engine faint under the storm. Headlights flickered across the snow outside, pale beams cutting into the dark. They all turned toward the window, hope sparking in their eyes. I didn't move, because I knew whoever was arriving, whatever waited beyond that door, would not be their salvation. The headlights cut through the snow like knives, blinding against the dark glass. The hum of the engine throbbed under the storm's howl, steady, deliberate. For a moment, no one breathed. My grandchildren sat frozen, their faces twisted by firelight and fear. Emily whispered, "It's the police." "It has to be." Claire snapped, "Don't be stupid." "Why would they come here?" Matthew muttered, "Because she called them. She's been planning this." His eyes locked on me, suspicion burning. I didn't move, just stared at the snow-smeared window. You think justice arrives when you call it. Number. Justice comes when it wants. The engine cut. The headlights dimmed. Silence pressed heavier than the storm. A knock. 3 times. Slow. Heavy. The air in the room thickened. Claire's husband hissed, "Don't open it!" I rose. My chair scraped the floor, the sound sharp enough to make them flinch. My steps echoed as I crossed the wooden boards. I rested my hand on the brass knob, cold as ice. The knock came again. I pulled the door open. A figure stood against the white fury of the storm, coat dusted in snow, scarf pulled high over his mouth. He lowered it, and my heart tightened. It was Mr. Harper, my lawyer. Old, steady, a man whose eyes had seen too much to be surprised by storms or family greed. He held a briefcase in one hand, his breath fogging. "Evening, Joe," he said. His voice carried calm. "Sorry I'm late." Roads were bad. I stepped aside. "Come in!" The others erupted. "What is this?" Matthew demanded. "Why is he here?" Claire added, panic slicing her voice. Mr. Harper brushed snow from his coat, his expression unreadable. He placed the briefcase on the table, right on top of the spilled wine and scattered folders. The firelight gleamed against the metal clasp. He clicked it open. The sound was final, sharp. Inside, papers. Neat stacks. My will. "You already have one," Matthew snapped, pointing at the envelope. Mr. Harper shook his head. "That was the draft. This is the final, notarized, binding version." The storm wailed against the house, but his words were louder. I sat again at the head of the table, calm, steady. "Go on," I said. "Read it to them." He did, slowly, clearly. Each line another blow. "To my grandchildren, Matthew, Claire, Daniel, Emily, having reviewed your conduct, your treatment of me, and your financial deceit, I hereby remove you from all inheritance. You are not heirs. You will receive nothing." Gasps, curses, whispers. Matthew shoved back from the table. "This is a trick. She can't—" Mr. Harper didn't flinch. "It's signed, sealed, filed, irrevocable." The storm rattled the windows, snow piling high. Claire's husband leaned forward, voice trembling. "Then who gets it?" The lawyer's eyes flicked to me. I answered before he could. "Not you. Not any of you. Everything I built goes to causes you've mocked. Shelters, food banks, homes for the abandoned, people who know the cold you left me in." Their faces twisted. Greed curdled into rage. "You're insane," Matthew spat. "You'd give it to strangers before your own blood." I held his gaze. Strangers didn't leave me to freeze. The fire popped, a sharp spark leaping into the air. Shadows bent across their faces, monstrous now, greedy and snarling. Emily sobbed openly, clutching the folder with her debts. Daniel cursed, pacing like a caged animal. Claire glared at her husband, the weight of her affair heavy in the silence. Matthew trembled with rage, fists clenched. I sat calm, hands folded, watching them unravel. "You thought you could devour me," I said softly, "but look at you, devouring each other instead. Predators, nothing more. And predators don't inherit. They starve when the prey is gone." The storm shrieked outside, but it couldn't match the silence that followed. Finally, Matthew stood. His chair toppled behind him. He jabbed a finger toward me. "You'll regret this." I shook my head. "I already regretted raising you. That regret is gone now." His jaw tightened. He turned sharply, grabbed his coat, and stomped to the door. He pulled hard, but the snow resisted, groaning before finally giving way. Cold air rushed in. He stepped into the storm without another word. One by one, the others followed. No goodbyes, no apologies, only curses, mutters, and the sound of boots crunching into snow. Their shadows vanished into the blizzard. I closed the door behind them. The latch clicked. Silence returned. The fire crackled, steady now. Candle wax had melted into pools, hardening as it cooled. The smell of pine filled the room, mixed with smoke and spilled wine. Mr. Harper closed his briefcase. "You're certain about this, Joe?" No second thoughts. I poured myself a cup of tea, steam rising into the dim light. I had second thoughts last year when I begged for warmth. Not anymore. He nodded, gathered his things, and left. The storm swallowed his headlights as quickly as they appeared. I sat alone at the head of the table, watching the fire burn low. The tree lights flickered softly, ornaments glinting. The room was warm, steady, mine. Outside, the storm raged, swallowing my grandchildren whole. Inside, I was calm. For the first time in years, I felt justice. Not joy, not triumph, but cold justice. I whispered to the empty chairs, "Merry Christmas." The wind howled in reply.